thing I remembered about Washington, I mean, I didn't know them from anybody, and really didn't care. They had these weird numbers, remember those old numbers, that weird looking font?
Yeah.
They had, I said, those are kind of
But Bramwell had the record for punt returns for quite a
Yep,
while, didn't he?
he did.
Kickoff returns.
He did.
And then here you are calling
I
Dante
know,
Pettis
it's just crazy.
when Dante broke the record.
I know.
I just saw that highlight the other day on the internet of you calling it. So there's something.
Yeah.
Something there.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I got a call from Joe Kelly this morning. He did a piece on Dan Rayleigh's Husky Maven on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And he asked him to compare the 84 team versus the 91 team. And Joe said, 91 was the best because they won the national title. They went undefeated. But our defense, he said, I'll take those guys in a dark alley. And Mario Bailey kicked in and started saying, we would have given you the business. And Joe's like, what's the business? So now we got a little family feud going.
Sure.
So I got to ask you, and 78.
I knew you would.
78. Now, of course, football's changed, right? Evolved tremendously. But the 78 team versus the 84 team versus the 91 team.
I'd probably have to move it to the 84 versus the 91, and then you're gonna put me on a terrible spot here. But that 91 bunch did go undefeated, Jimmy. They did everything they were asked to do. They put a whole lot, as did the 84 team, put a whole lot of guys in the league. And I'd have to go with that one. Maybe the greatest season of all time, if I can hedge my bet here. Probably the greatest season of all time, and arguably the greatest team as well.
So 91, that pretty much wraps up the show.
Yeah, it's been good
nice
talking to you,
seeing
Jimmy.
you,
You guys were good, but you weren't quite good enough.
Yeah, well, we had an offense that was, not nearly the same as that offense.
That's very true.
One first
very
down
true.
against,
Yeah, defensively though, and very similar type teams.
Yeah.
You go back and you watch videos of both those two teams, and historic video tends not to hold up against present time a lot of times because we try to put that in the context of now, but it's almost as if now doesn't necessarily hold up very well compared to those. I watched the way those teams, you guys ran to the ball, just the enthusiasm with which you played, the ferocity with which you played, I think is timeless, and it's really fun to go back in. If I'm a Husky coach today, I take my team and I show them those teams in those games and how they played, because it was exemplary and, as I say, I think really timeless.
So the 91 team versus a current Alabama team, is that a fair question?
That is a fair question, and the Alabama team that Washington played in the tournament, if you will, down in Atlanta, I got to halftime and was talking with my Alabama counterpart, a guy named Eli Gold, who's a legendary broadcaster and a wonderful guy, and a great broadcaster as well. And after watching that first half, I walked over to Eli and said, "This may be the best defense I've ever seen." And that says a lot, because that would include the 91 team. It would include that great championship Miami team that destroyed Washington back in 2001. I thought at that time, boy, that's about as good as it gets. But that Alabama team that the Huskies played, and I think played reasonably competitively with, but man, did they have some guys. And how they played reminded me a lot of how those great Husky defenses played. Again, just so stout at the point of attack, but so fearless and so relentless in running to the football. It's really impressive, and not everybody does it.
Now, Bob, your knowledge for the game's fantastic. So I
don't know about that.
I read where before the games you go and study film with the coaches. Was that something that you were proactive on? Were you just invited one day and it turned into something? Did you ask them to allow you to watch film?
Yeah, that back in the day when there was film, it was an interesting time, and I think again we talk about all the technology and the television and everything, and that filters right down to your game preparation and how you coach and how you build your coaching staff and your program. But when we acquired the Huskies, Jimmy, in '78, I didn't know squat, and was the first to admit it. I mean, I'd played football as a kid, et cetera, but as far as any kind of sophistication and knowledge of the game, I was way on the outside looking in, and so I kind of befriended Jim Lambright early on. Because I wasn't going to go up and say, "Hey, Coach James, can you come watch, string up some film and teach me about the game?" Don certainly had better things to do, as did Jim. But Jim was good enough to take the time, and I'd go over to the Graves building, go into the film room as the team was maybe getting ready to go out to practice, and Jim had some time between his pre-practice meeting and going out. And he would sit down with me, and we'd, back and forth, as you did with the film. He first taught me to string up the projector, so that was a good start. But you'd pull game films, and I would just ask what were, I'm sure, rudimentary and oftentimes stupid questions, and Jim was unbelievably patient. But he would say, he would explain coverages and defenses and what an offense was running and responses to formations and all those kinds of things. And I ate it up, absolutely ate it up, because I thought, it was important. I felt a little naive and ignorant going in, and I didn't like that feeling professionally. You want to be as prepared as you can and as educated as you can be. And I'd on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or all of the above, would go in and watch film. And back then I was, in my mind, I had to memorize every player on the field. I later learned that really wasn't that necessary, but that was important to me too, and in game preparation, putting together a spotting board and all those kind of things. But mostly it was understanding the game at an accelerated level, at the level with which college football is played, and the level with which I needed to educate myself to broadcast it right.
Okay, so you're 33 years old, and you land in Seattle from Denver to Phoenix.
I was actually 27 years old
27 years
when I got to Seattle.
Okay.
And it was spring of 1977. I had never been to Seattle. I had, prior to that, been working in Phoenix, and I was a news guy. I was a radio news guy, and went to work for an all-news station in Phoenix, debuting all-news station that was associated, NBC back then experimented with an all-news network, not just like an all-news radio station. It was all-news network, and you would program your station that way. And I'd been in Denver, and this seemed like a really cool opportunity. Moved down to Phoenix doing news, and that opportunity wound up falling flat on its face. The station didn't survive. The NBC News Network didn't survive, and I'm looking for a job. And so I started just kind of networking around with some people that I'd worked with in Denver, one of whom was in Seattle. It was a country and western DJ. I worked at a station in Denver that played country music, but had a very, very strong news department, and kind of cut my chops doing that. And then, as I say, moved to Phoenix, and then now I'm out of a job, and the guy's name was Lee Rogers. He was a DJ up here, and he said, "Well, I'll nose around a little bit." And he said, "Well, at that time," he said, "Cairo's kind of looking for a news guy, and I hear Como's looking for a sports guy. I don't know if you want to do sports." And I said, "Sure. I know about sports. I played sports, and yeah, who is it?" And I'll give him a call, and so I did, and it turned out KOMO was the station looking for a sports director, because they really didn't have one on the radio side. They were using Bruce King to come drop in some sports from the TV side, and Bob Blackburn. They did have the Sonics then, but they were looking for a full-time sports guy, because bear in mind, the Seahawks had just gotten going in '76. The Mariners' first year was 1977. You got the Sonics, and Seattle is turning into a major league sports town. And I came up and auditioned for the job, and lo and behold, got the job as the sports director at KOMO. And soon thereafter, the station acquired the rights to the University of Washington for the following season, and away we went.
So almost 4 decades later, you're the voice of the Huskies.
Correct.
You were awarded 11 of the Washington State Sportscaster Award
Yep.
of the Year.
Yep.
Not consecutive.
No.
I think
Here and there. That,
So did you
know,
make a lot of enemies amongst your peers, or was it
No,
like
not really.
like Michael Jordan won 6 in a row, and all those Barkley and all those guys didn't get a chance at the championship? Was it like that amongst your?
No, I think it's more a question, who are your friends?
Yeah.
Because that award is based on votes among the media. And so if you were
be nice
well
to- be
respected
nice.
and had some buddies in the media, chances are you might
Right.
get a vote or two for Sportscaster of the Year. And again, I was lucky enough to, I've always said, and you might recall when you guys went into the Husky Hall of Fame, Jimmy, I went in with you, the '84 team, and we all went in together. And I talked that night at just the value of timing and how important that is. And when the timing is such that an opportunity presents itself, you have to be ready to respond to that. And boy, that tells as much a tale about my career at Washington as anything. You know, right place, right time, and a lot of things just fell into place, and
Did
I
you
took
have offers?
advantage of them.
Did you have offers along the way to jump ship, or ABC, CBS, ESPN?
You know, I never pursued any network offers. There was a time in the late 80s, 86 to 88, that 3-year period, KOMO lost the broadcast rights for the Huskies, having had them since 78 through the 85 season, lost them for 86 to Cairo Radio. And obviously Cairo and I talked, and Como was telling me, well, we'd like you to stay, and here's what we can do if you stay. And long story short, I couldn't get together on an offer with Cairo, and so moved away from the Huskies and did some radio, and that's when I started doing some television work at Como as well. Ill-fated as that turned out to be.
Yeah, I read about that. So a lot of people don't like the way they look on TV. A lot of people don't like their voice. Most people. So was it a situation where you didn't like the way you looked, or you just wasn't your niche versus radio?
Yes. Keep going.
So what's the trick if you want to give somebody advice that says, "Oh my God, I sound like that," or "I look like that"? How do you get over that? Because you're a good-looking guy.
I was obviously never worried about how I was going to sound. I figured I'd sound okay, but I was never comfortable with this thing right here.
Interesting.
As you have to be, I think, to be successful at television. I was more intimidated than friendly with the camera, and I was fine. I was okay. I was never in my own mind very good, and I think anytime whatever you're doing, if in your own mind you don't think you're very good, you're probably not. I could have gotten by, and but I never saw myself advancing to any great degree on the TV side. I always much preferred the radio side.
Interesting.
And, after those 3 years, fortunately, KOMO reacquired the broadcast rights to the Huskies, and I jumped back in that. Tried to do both for a while, and I'm not sure served either master as well as I should have. And had to make a choice, and with some assistance from the powers that be at KOMO, you need to figure out which way you want to go here, and that was really an easy choice, and I went back and just did the radio deal full time.
So nobody tried to take you in the 90s? None of the major?
I had some opportunities to move on, but again, I was really, really enjoying being in Seattle. I thought it was, those were among the greatest times, I think, in this city's history. It was a great place to be. It offered me everything I was looking for, lifestyle-wise, quality of life. I really enjoy the outdoor opportunities here in the Pacific Northwest, and was taking full advantage of those, and really wasn't interested in moving, and started a family, and one thing led to another, and I really didn't pursue a lot of opportunities elsewhere, because it was everything that I was kind of looking for in life I had right here.
Now, Don was brilliant with this 48 hours before a game. So he gave his speech to us on Thursdays at 12:30, and from that point till kickoff at 12:30, you would no laughing, no whistling, no elevated voices. So as a sportscaster, what was your 48 hours? Were you still studying film? Would you not use your voice as much as possible going into a Saturday? What's your 48 hours like before a Saturday kickoff?
Well, it's as with as with the preceding 48 and the preceding 48 to that. It's much as you guys as players, it's nonstop, and game preparation begins for somebody who, at least in my opinion, does it right. Your game preparation starts Monday, and you allocate certain things to each day of the week. But those final 48 hours were hugely important, both in terms of and you got more than a game to do. You got 2 or 3 hour pregame show. You're gonna have a postgame show and all of that, and a lot of that was scripted stuff. And there's a whole lot more preparation involved in this thing than people understand. And I invariably, I've told people that along the way, and they we never knew. I just kind of show up, eat a free hot dog, drink a free Coke, and call the game. What could be better? What a dream job. You hardly have to work at all.
What time would you get there on a Saturday for a 12:30 kickoff?
Back when they had 12:30 kickoffs, that was fun too. Back in the day. We'd get there probably 8 o'clock.
What time would you leave?
On a 12:30 kickoff, and we did a full postgame show, phone in, call in, postgame show, and everything. It'd be 6, 7 o'clock time we got out of there. It's a long day, a very taxing day.
So 1,400 football and basketball games for the University of Washington.
I'll take your word for it, Jimmy, because frankly, I have never counted, and I couldn't tell you whether it was 1,400 or 14,000.
Did you have any vacation time while you were working?
Sure.
What months?
The summer months were great. You get through spring football, and that would be a busy time, but June, July, and part of August was pretty quiet, and I took full advantage of that as well. Why wouldn't you be in here?
And you're a fantastic fisherman, I understand.
I'm a fisherman. I'll leave the fantastic to you, but my enjoyment of my enjoyment of it is fantastic and has been since I was a kid.
Did you travel to Argentina on a fishing
Been to
trip?
Argentina.
Where did you fly into? Buenos Aires?
BA for a night, and one of the great meals I've had. One of the cheapest great meals I've ever had. It was unbelievable.
Steak?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Malbec wine, and
Yeah.
just at prices you just wow.
Yeah.
I could maybe live here. But yeah, I went down and fished Patagonia for sea run brown trout. Really fun.
I did live there twice.
I know
for
you
about
did.
9 months, so I just thoroughly enjoyed it. But a chicken meal was more expensive than a steak.
I know.
Fantastic.
No wonder you enjoyed it down there.
And did you go to any of the horses down there?
Did not. It was strictly a fishing trip, and that was educational as well, and really fun. And the great thing about it was, and they do grow some nice horses in Argentina, by the way, but you knew you were someplace different. We flew out of Buenos Aires. It was dark early in the morning, and flew way down south to Patagonia, and the sun's coming up, and you look out and you kind of survey the landscape, and you go, whoa, where am I? This is different here. It was really an extraordinary trip, and a great visit, and enlightening in a lot of ways.
Do you have a favorite jockey currently who's active horse racing?
Oh boy, that's a good question. My favorite jockey of all time is a guy named Gary Stevens,
Sure.
who got his start here in the Northwest at Long Acres. Gary rode horses for us at Long Acres, and then just exploded, and is as good a rider who has ever put a foot in a stirrup and gotten on a racehorse. There's so many great riders nowadays. It'd be hard to even pick one. There's a huge colony of amazing riders. It's a really competitive business.
I was going to say Irad Ortiz, the Ortiz brothers.
The Ortiz brothers, John Velasquez can still really ride. But and back in my day, Bill Shoemaker was riding. Eddie Arcaro was just kind of going out, but Shoemaker, Lafitte Pinkai actually rode a horse or two for us along the way through the years. An outstanding rider, and for a long time the leading rider in the country. Gary Bays, who was fairly legendary here at Long Acres, rode horses for us and was always a terrific rider and a good guy and a friend. I can go on and on and on.
Speaking of horses, can you give us a couple of sentences what your thoughts are when I say Breno de Feo? I mean, there's a horse that was never tied. Do you remember Breno through high school?
The Italian Stallion, absolutely. Breno was, I remember when he got recruited here, it was like a big deal. We got Breno de Feo, and turned out to be a pretty solid player here. Yeah, I do remember
He was the youngest Husky to score in the history of the University of Washington up until Napoleon Kaufman came along.
Right, yeah. Breno got off to a good start and
blew a knee out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So anyhow, let's talk more about your accolades. So you won the Chris Schenkel Lifetime Achievement Award. You won the Washington State Sportscaster 11 times. I think something people need to hear more about is the fact that you have a day named after you. And so can you tell us a little bit about that, Bob? It's the Apple Cup, which kept its name, or is the Apple Cup name gone? Is it the Bob Rondo Day? Was it just for that season, or is that going?
It was just for that season.
Okay.
That was an unbelievable week leading up to my last home game as the voice of the Huskies, and I was embarrassed by the amount of love that I got showered with that whole week. And interestingly, it started on the Thursday. You talked about Thursday being a special day in your preparation. The Thursday before the Apple Cup, and this would be 2017, Chris Peterson asked me to come talk to the team. First time ever that had happened, in the team room. And they bring in, throughout the week, ex-Huskies to fire the guys up, talk about the Apple Cup. And he said, why don't you come talk to the guys just about kind of the history of the Apple Cup that they may not be aware of. And, he said, just be yourself, and you can say bad words and stuff if you want, which I made liberal use of. But it was a great moment to get in and be able to talk to the whole team, the coaching staff in the team room about my experiences in the Apple Cup and just kind of what the Apple Cup really meant to this state and what it should mean to you guys if it doesn't already. And that was a hell of a moment. And one of the really cool things was when it was finished and the guys were filing out, there was just one door and the whole team filed out through that one door, but I got to stand at that, almost like a reception line at a wedding, but I got to stand and shake the hand of every player and coach walking out the door. It was a really special moment. And then leading up to the weekend, and that game day was Bob Rondo Day in King County. I know Dow Constantine, the county manager here, county executive, and I told Dow if he'd give me a day and name it after me, I'd vote for him next time. I'll be here all night. But that was a Dow Constantine creation, which was really cool. So it was so proclaimed. It was Bob Rondo Day in Seattle, which was really cool in King County. And then, of course, during the game, that moment when the entire North Grandstand lower bowl stood up and held up the "Thanks Bob" card sign, as it turned out to be. And man, I get
what a great memory.
Cheered up a little bit even now talking about it. It was an awesome memory and an awesome day, and dogs played great, and it couldn't have been a better day.
Great. Now, when you first picked up a microphone, did your mother or a friend or did somebody say, you have an incredible voice? When you were younger, did anybody suggest that you sing for a living? Did you ever consider singing for a living?
No. I was in the choir at University Park Elementary School. That was my the extent of my singing career. I was in the alto section.
You were in the alto?
Yeah, I was an alto then, and little did I know that I would make a career with my voice in another way. I wanted to be a heavy equipment driver back then when I was a little kid, so I really didn't have any any plans to be in the entertainment business for sure. But no, there was nothing of that sort that would suggest what would happen later on in life.
Now, Bob, your last name, French. Was your
Correct.
mother? Does your mother have any French in her maiden name, or was it
No,
just your father?
It's on my dad's side, and there's French and German and all manner of things on both sides of the family. But the EAU ending to the name dates back to some French heritage in the family.
Pronounced O, obviously.
Correct.
Not O, but O.
Right.
The
And,
O,
and
the
mispronounced any number of times along the way, but
O, misspelled.
yeah, true. Yeah, the RONDO. I almost went ahead and changed my name to that because everybody kind of used that.
Bought a consonant.
Yeah, really.
So the EAU means water, right?
Correct.
In French, okay, and it's actually a little more specific. It's diluted perfume or less concentrated perfume. Have
I
you
think
heard
it's
that
interesting.
before?
You know more about my name than I do, Jimmy. That's great.
That's not a good thing.
You're well more prepared than I am.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a pilot in the Second World War, flew a B-24 bomber, and after the war got into the insurance business, worked for Metropolitan Insurance for a long time. My mom had a couple of kids, and she later would work in real estate and became a loan officer in a savings and loan back when. My dad moved from the insurance business into the engraving business, which was back then, if you were going to run an advertisement in the Seattle Times, there had to be a metal plate with your ad on it that was transferred, via the printing presses into the newspaper. My dad was in that business, and ultimately got out of that and bought a horse farm up north of Denver, and got into the horse business, and that's where.
How old were you?
I was high school into college when that was all going on, and that was my introduction to horses. They started off racing quarter horses and boarding horses and so forth, and we'd go up to the farm on weekends, and he'd put us to work, and I learned how to muck stalls and got some hands-on experience and fell in love with the animals, and have been dabbling in it, if you will, ever since.
Which brings me to another question. Santa Anita with the horses that were dying. That's my favorite place, Santa Anita down in Arcadia. I could live there in a heartbeat.
You bet.
But I met some of the owners down there, and it seemed like they cared more about the horses than anybody, if not as much. So I know there are a lot of angry agencies that were mad at the people of Santa Anita. Do you have any idea? I mean, personally, I thought it was the track. Something to do with the track, with all the deaths that were taking place. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, there was.
That the owners actually care more for those.
I'd like
horses?
to think so. Those who are anti-horse racing, you will not change their minds. They see it as a blood sport, and the animals are for our pleasure, and beyond that, we don't respect them. That's totally not true. I think Santa Anita definitely had some issues with the racing surface itself.
It wasn't for lack of care.
Not the least
If
little bit.
anything, they
No.
cared too much.
These horses are super well cared for, but at times, you get horses running that probably should not be running, or presaging an injury that might be ready to happen, but are run anyway. And there's some irresponsibility in there. I won't deny that. But Santa Anita was having huge issues with their racetrack, both the turf course and the main track. They, in budgetary moves, had let go of a 25-year track superintendent, and also the Super for the turf course. They also had one of the worst winter weather situations ever in Southern California. Track was a mess, both from a training standpoint and the racing itself. And I think came under a massive microscope. And I think to the point of keeping the tabs, if you will, a body count on the horses that were lost became way too much of a pastime. I don't think Santa Anita was that far different from any other track in the country when you're running 10 races a day and you're training horses, training 100, 200 horses every morning. You know, injuries do happen, but I think Santa Anita was maybe a little bit pointed out too hard, if you will. But having said that, you know, there have been some positive things come out of that regarding, you know, race day medication, and I think more importantly, just increased veterinary supervision of the horses, both in training and on race day, and I think that's been hugely helpful.
Your favorite track?
Santa Anita probably would be that, just the setting of it all, the history of it all. I've always thought they should, much as I've always thought that every important football game should be played in the Rose Bowl for similar reasons. And curiously, it's about, 5 miles away from Santa Anita. But I've always thought every major race day should, Breeders' Cup should just run at Santa Anita every year. A spectacular place. Del Mar is a very, very nice racetrack. Oaklawn Park, where we run some horses right now, getting ready to open here pretty soon, is a amazingly competitive meet and a really interesting place, destination type place. And Santa Anita on the West Coast, and if you've ever been to Saratoga, that's a whole different deal too. I'm sorry?
Florida? Saratoga?
No, Saratoga Springs, New York.
Oh, it is New York.
Upstate New York. And again, for very similar reasons, unbelievable history, unbelievable caliber of racing. And Saratoga's kind of a destination type meet, much as Del Mar is. And I think those are the meets, if you go around the country, those are the meets that are really successful now. People that are trying to do it on a day-to-day basis, it's a grind. Emerald Downs will tell you that, but they're hanging in there and getting through it.
Mm-hmm. Back to sportscasting. Did you emulate anybody? Keith Jackson, Howard Cosell?
I've been asked that a lot throughout my career, Jimmy, and the answer is absolutely no. No, but there were, when I'm growing up and watching TV and listening to the radio, there's the Lindsey Nelsons of the world. I always really enjoyed him, and certainly Chris Schenkel, interestingly enough, as it would turn out, and Keith Jackson, all those guys. But I never really patterned myself after those guys. I, again, had cut my broadcast teeth in the news business. And so I if anything, patterned myself after the guys that I thought were really competent, that could do multiple sports.
That was Schenkel in a nutshell.
Absolutely.
He started Harvard football, then the Giants.
Yeah.
He did the Triple Crown, tennis,
Did everything.
automobiles.
Bowling.
That's why it's so intriguing to me that you found your niche and stayed right there with the Husky football and basketball. But I know you did the soccer when you were first coming up.
Yeah,
in the ranks.
back in the day.
But
And if I was ignorant about football, boy, you should have seen me about soccer. But no, I just tried to be myself. And when I'm asked that, and by younger aspiring broadcasters and so forth, the very first thing I tell them, do not try to sound like somebody. Do not try to sound like a sportscaster. How you think a sportscaster is supposed to sound like yourself. Be yourself. Let me get to know you as you rather than you imitating somebody else. And I always embraced that myself. So no, there was no one that I thought I sounded like or even wanted to. You know, it was good enough just to be me.
And did you get a chance to meet the greats, Howard Cosell's?
I never met Howard Cosell. I met Keith. I actually played a round of golf with Keith and Dan Fouts at Seattle Golf Club one day, which was great fun. Never got to meet Chris Schenkel. Got to meet Mike Tirico, who I have tremendous respect for, and I think is really state of the art. And told him as much. He was the MC at the Waldorf Astoria the night that the National Football Foundation had their Hall of Fame induction deal, and that's when the Chris Schenkel Award was presented. And I happened to be seated at the dais right next to the MC, Mike Tirico. We had a great visit all night long, and he had listened to Washington football. You know, he was in and out of Seattle doing games and so forth, whether it was an NFL game or whatever. But said, you know, I remember you. I remember listening to you and thought you did a really good job. And I returned the compliment to him. I think he's about as good as it gets.